Hi there, welcome to another edition of Counterpunch, the show that exposes the ongoing world communist revolution and pushes back. Please like the show, share the show, subscribe to EpochTV. Also go to my website, trevorlouden.com. I have a brand new book out, House Un-Americans, part 1 of 6, exposing 100 members of the US Congress and their communist ties. Well, today's episode is about Minnesota. One of my favorite states, beautiful state, wonderful people, and pretty much communist now. It has gone so far left, one of the most left-wing states in the country, and getting worse every day. Well, how did it come to this? How did the communists take over Minnesota? Minnesota is largely rural. The rural areas tend to be conservative, the cities tend to be liberal, and the countryside balances out the cities. But in Minnesota, up until recent times, a lot of the country areas, specifically in the north, have been very, very far left. And that's helped to skew the politics of the whole state. It's been left now for nearly 100 years. So how did this happen? Well, back in 1905, there was a failed communist revolution in Russia. And the Tsarist police rounded up thousands of people, put them in prison camps, etc., and cracked down hard. Thousands of communists from all over the Russian Empire fled the country. Now, Finland was part of the Russian Empire at the time and had a very big communist movement. And in 1905, thousands of those communists fled Finland, and they came to a place that was much like what they'd come from. That was the northern part of Minnesota, what they call the Iron Range. Lots of mining, farming, lumber, etc. Very much like Finland, and thousands of Finns poured into the area, many of them communists. You know, before long, there was a communist culture all through northern Minnesota. There was Finnish workers' halls, there was co-ops, there was unions, there were socialist newspapers, businesses, dotting all over the Iron Range. By 1913, a third of the Finns in the Iron Range were estimated to be socialists or Marxists. When the Communist Party of the United States was set up in 2019, within a few years, 40% of its membership nationwide were of Finnish extraction. You know, the famous Gus Hall, the leader of the Communist Party for about 40 years, was an Iron Range Red Finn. Now, at the same time, the communists in the Iron Range got involved in local politics. They set up the Farmer Labor Party in 1918. And now that grew into a big party in Minnesota, and through the Depression era, it produced 3 governors of the state, 4 US senators, 8 Congress members, and lots of state reps and state senators, etc., including an actual Communist Party USA member called John Bernard, who became a congressman for northern Minnesota during the 1930s.
We'll make America land all can love. Organize her, unionize her, make the bright star of right shine above.
The communists were heavily involved in the Farmer Labor Party. They had an ally in the Minnesota governor, Elmer Benson. By 1936, the communists completely controlled the Farmer Labor Party. In 1944, Elmer Benson and a future vice president named Hubert Humphrey, a bit of a legend in Minnesota, began to merge the Farmer Labor Party with the Democratic Party to form what is now called the DFL, the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, which is Minnesota's branch of the Democratic Party. Humphrey had actually worked in the Works Progress Administration, which was one of those big New Deal agencies set up under Roosevelt and staffed and led by communists. He was very close personal friends with a well-known Minnesota communist called Nellie Stone Johnson. They were very close buddies, and Stone Johnson advised Humphrey on politics. Now, the Communist Party of Minnesota withered away in the 1950s. You know, they started to get a lot of pressure. many members just moved straight into the DFL. They moved out of the Communist Party and just went into the Democratic Party. There wasn't a lot of difference, but you could hide there. You weren't called out for being a communist. By the 2000s, the Minnesota Communist Party was down to a handful of members, but it still maintained a lot of influence even then. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison used to hold regular fundraisers in the home of the Minnesota Communist Party leader Erwin Marquette. And well-known Labor Union leader and Communist Party member Mark Fromke had close ties to former Governor Mark Dayton, former Senator Al Franken, and the current Senator Amy Klobuchar. The Socialists. Well, as the Communists faded, the Socialist Party and Democratic Socialists of America started to become more prominent. You know, the Communist Party really sunk in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, but Democratic Socialists of America grew. It was really a replacement in many ways for the Communist Party and pretty much shares their policy. DSA is a communist party, though they don't like to admit it. A prominent St. Paul mayor, Jim Scheibel, in the 90s, was a DSA comrade. State Rep Michael Paymar was also a DSA activist. He was active in Duluth and also in north of Minneapolis there. Donald M. Fraser, another very prominent Minnesota congressman, was at least a DSA sympathizer. He would go to Socialist International meetings. He worked with DSA, worked very closely with Amy Klobuchar, who was a long-time socialist, and he was in the socialist camp 100%. Then there's the iconic Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone, still a legend in Minnesota today and thought highly of, not just on the left, but also by many, many more moderate Minnesotans. Now, he died in a plane crash in 2002 and would have almost certainly run for president had he not been killed. This is how deeply Minnesota is penetrated by communists, folks. People need to understand the reason you're seeing these crazy laws, the reason you're seeing all this left-wing policy rammed down your throat is that the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, at least one of your senators, most of your congressmen, a whole bunch of your state senators, many of your city councillors are in the Marxist camp. And they want Minnesota to be the bulwark of the revolution, the Midwest base of the US revolution. So I hope you found this interesting and a little thought-provoking. I hope you will not take my word for any of this, but go and do your study. And I hope you'll go to my website, trevorlouden.com, and read my books and watch my DVDs, because a lot of what I've told you here, you can find out for yourself with the references in my books, especially one called Burn This Book, which basically deals, it's the life of Keith Ellison, your Attorney General, detailing his extensive radical Islamic ties, his extensive communist and socialist ties. So thanks very much for tuning in. I hope to see you back with the next episode. God bless America, God bless Minnesota, and God bless every one of you. Thanks for watching.